Welcome to Coffee to Go, where we center ourselves in the scriptures, seasons, and holy days of the Christian tradition. I'm Karin Peter, here with Blake Smith, and we welcome you on the journey. So this is the fifth Sunday of Lent, Lent being the 40 days between Ash Wednesday and Easter, not counting Sundays. And it's the time in which we really try to turn away from what distracts us or blocks our commitment to discipleship or our willingness to be in spiritual relationship with the divine. So that period of time is coming to a close this week with our final Sunday of Lent. And so we look at where we are with Jesus this week, and we are headed to Judea, to the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus.
All right. And I just want to say that Karin and I have decided that, I don't know if it is the people who put together the lectionary or it was the biblical writers, but apparently they wanted to help us with this idea of fasting during Lent. The scriptures are so long that you're likely to miss a meal while you hear them read. Today's verses come from the Gospel according to John, the 11th chapter, and it is 1 through 45. The raising of Lazarus. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then, after this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world, but those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, See how he loved him? But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, Unbind him and let him go. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. So why does this matter?
Okay, before you start with that, I just want to go back to what we talked about last week, and that is the whole idea that blind man was born blind so that God could be glorified. And we have it here again. Lazarus died so that God could be glorified. So as you're reading it, I'm hearing this, and maybe it just helps us more into what the idea of the scripture is. Instead of this person's ill or sick or blind or dead so that God could be glorified when you see me heal them, it could be more of a, well, I don't know why this person is blind, but we're going to turn this into something that glorifies God.
Absolutely. And
It's just a different way to look at it.
Yeah. I often try to help people understand and acknowledging that it is what I believe, that God doesn't do bad things to us so that God can come in and save the day.
Right.
But that bad things happen to us, and that because of God's love for us, there can be an acknowledgement of God's part in the healing or the being with us, even in the midst of our sorrow. So, I remember hearing many times, where was God in 9/11?
Right.
And the response being among the people who were hurting and searching, and that's where God was. So, Jesus doesn't hurry to reach Lazarus before he dies. He waits and then raises him from the dead, which brings up that question of why, which has already been kind of alluded to in the passage, and then you talk about it. It wasn't because he didn't care. Obviously, in this passage, we see some of the emotions that human side of Jesus that we talk about a lot. He weeps with empathy when he finally returns to the household of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And when he sees the weeping of the people there, he is deeply moved. But this was an opportunity after the fact, as you have mentioned, to point to the divine life-giving power that overcomes darkness and death, the presence of God in our midst. Bethany is not a Jesus-friendly town. That they are the ones who recently tried to stone Jesus to death.
Okay, so Thomas has my favorite line in this whole thing. So they had recently tried to kill Jesus, and the disciples say, Why are you going there? Have you forgotten that they tried to kill you last time? And then we go on with the text, and then somewhere towards the bottom, you have Thomas going, well, I guess we have to go and die with him. You can just,
right.
it was like,
come on.
poor Thomas.
we signed up for this.
Yep, I guess we're going. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, in spite of Thomas's reminder, Jesus says, "Not, we're going." He goes at risk to himself. He knows that he is going to face hate and disbelief, and he does something outrageous. In the midst of that, he returns a dead man to life, which for some would have been a point of great glory, and for others, it was just a deepening of their resentment and hatred for him, most likely. Um, but the fact is that the raising of Lazarus isn't even the most important part of the story. I mean, it's the most showy, it's the
Yeah,
most fantastical, if you will, part of the story. But the importance is found in the response of the people when they're faced with something that completely defied logical explanation. And the response in this case was belief that Jesus was, in fact, powered by God, so to
yeah,
speak. And they opened themselves to this way of thinking. Lives were changed, and many turned toward belief in divine power over death. Uh, that's the way it happened in the passage, and
yeah.
leads me to some questions because of the way I see and I believe that people view these types of things. So one question, for instance, that I would ask out of this is, when I encounter the unexpected, is my response driven by fear or deeper belief?
Mm.
And another question would be, what would I do with a second chance?
Every morning is a second chance, Blake.
Right? It is. So you get up and you start the new day. Yesterday is gone.
Yep.
Obviously, Lazarus was a little bit more dramatic than that. He had a 4-day break. Uh, but um, but that's a great point, Karin. Every day we have a chance to start again. As we think about this passage and Lazarus' chance to start again,
Yeah.
what do we do? What will we do with the new day of tomorrow? How will this encounter with the divine change us and move us into something new?
Okay. Well, we're going to stay with that. Every morning's a new beginning. So make every morning this week a Lazarus morning. So when you wake up, give thanks in whatever way works for you, whether it's prayer or thoughts or meditation, whatever works for you. Give thanks for your new life in this day. Every morning. Every morning this week is a Lazarus morning.
All right. And our blessing is called Out of the Cave, and it is by Joyce Sutpin. And I may have mispronounced that. So, Joyce, if you're listening, I apologize.
Okay.
Unless I got it right, then you're welcome.
Then you're good.
When you have been at war with yourself for so many years that you have forgotten why, when you have been driving for hours and only gradually begin to realize that you have lost the way, when you have cut hastily into the fabric, when you have signed papers in distraction, when it has been centuries since you watched the sunset or the rainfall and the clouds drifting overhead pass as flat as anything on a postcard, when in the midst of these everyday nightmares, you understand that you could wake up, you could turn and go back to the last thing you remember doing with your whole heart, that passionate kiss, the brilliant drop of love rolling along the tongue of a green leaf. Then you wake, you stumble from your cave, blinking in the sun, naming every shadow as it slips.
Beautiful
Oh,
description of a new day.
absolutely. Give you some more things to think about. Well, before we close out today, we want to just give you, our listeners, a heads up. We have been following for the last 3 years the gospel passages that are in the lectionary. Karin explains that every once in a while about what's included in the lectionary. In Community of Christ, we wander a little bit through the lectionary, sometimes
That's a good biblical term.
right? So sometimes we use the gospel text, sometimes we use the Psalms, sometimes the Old Testament, sometimes the letters as the key scripture for our worship planning. So we've decided here at Coffee to Go, Karin and I have decided that starting with Easter, we are going to use the text for our discussions that is being used for the worship on that Sunday. So just to give you a heads up of what's coming, we're going to be stepping out of the Gospels from time to time as we follow the lectionary key scripture put out by Community of Christ for their weekly worship.
So some of our listeners who have said, how come I listen to you guys and then I go to church and it's a different scripture? Here's why. And so we're gonna try it this way for a while and see how that works. We've been living in the Gospels for the whole 3-year cycle.
3 years,
Yeah.
with a few exceptions, like throwing in a psalm for Ash Wednesday.
Right. We haven't done many of those. So this will be really interesting to see how we do with the letters and the Old Testament scriptures that we get coming at us. So we'll see, starting Easter.
Yeah, so please feel free to give us your feedback, how you like that, if that's going to be helpful. We're looking forward to the new challenge. And that's going to wrap up this episode of Coffee to Go here. We invite you to join us next time for the next part of our journey through the liturgical seasons and holy days of the Christian tradition.